Hey everybody, Scott Detweather here. Welcome to one of my live streams, and today we're going to be doing some Photoshop. Specifically, we're going to be retouching this picture of the lovely Rachel. Her body paint, we're going to talk about fixing some of the flaws and mixes in the color there, because obviously painting her quickly and live, there's some things I need to fix in order to kind of make this a perfect portrait. And then we're going to do some discussions on applying virtual makeup. So it's kind of the exact same technique here because I need to fix coloration in the skin and I need to fix the skin as well. So I'm going to teach you how to do a proper skin retouching technique, and we're going to see how to kind of do the virtual makeup thing, which is part of this body paint correction. So that's what we're going to cover. So if you have any questions, throw those in the comments and we'll handle them. This is going to be kind of I'm not going to say it's a beginner level tutorial because a lot of these things that I've covered on the channel before, but we are going to be using frequency separation. Before you freak out and say, well, frequency separation produces a terrible image, that is not true. The technique you use with the frequency separation can make a terrible image. So frequency separation by itself is a great tool. It is just a technique on separating the color from the texture, but what you do with those two things can make art or make a travesty. So we're going to talk about how to use it the right way so that when you come out of this, your skin should look natural and it should look real. It shouldn't look like you messed with it. And if it's plasticky or something like that, then you've been given bad advice from somebody who doesn't know how to use the tool properly or to use the technique properly. All right, so that being said, I'm going to use a frequency separation action to actually perform the frequency separation itself. That action is free. You can grab it in the comments below, or in the comments below in the video description, just because taking the time, 15 minutes to explain how to separate it, when you really don't need to know the steps, they're the same every time except for one question, and that is how blurry. So let's start. I'm just going to say frequency separate, and it's going to ask you how blurry do you want it. So what I do is you take this little box and you hover it somewhere over the skin and you pick a number where you see some of the color, but you don't see a lot of texture. And you see, I see too much texture here, so I'm gonna take this up a bit. And I'm looking for that fine line between the two. And I think 5 is looking pretty good. I could probably go a little bit more, but let's keep it right at 5. And I'll show you how you know if it's the right number. And this is what the action will do, is just create the texture layer, which is this, where all the texture is on this layer. And you know if it's right because the only color you'll really see will be a hint of it in the lips. All the other colors should not be in here. They should look like a black and white. If you see color in here, then you did it wrong. You picked a number that was poor for the resolution of the image you had. Then the other layer you'll have will be this low layer, and that is the color only, and it shouldn't really have any texture. And we have a bit of texture in here, which is fine with me. I don't tend to destroy it with the process I'm going to show you, so this will be completely acceptable. Now between those, you notice I have a brush layer. This is where I like to do a lot of my work. Now in Photoshop, at least there was an update yesterday, so maybe they fixed it, but there's been a bug in Photoshop for like 3 years now that sometimes makes this layer a little wonky and it'll act weird. And we'll know if it happens because it'll look really wrong. So we'll discuss that bridge if we come to it. But for now, we're going to assume everything is good. So once we have this separated, now we can begin. By the way, I keep my background layer here as my original. If I ever need to come back, I can always re-separate it. Frequency separation is lossless, meaning that we can do this as many times as we need, and we don't have to worry about the image degrading each time. Unlike a lot of other things like saving as a JPEG or other processes that are destructive, this is non-destructive. So once we're done, we can actually flatten it, and if we need to separate it again, we can do so without a problem. In fact, a lot of images require more than one frequency separation pass to complete, and that's not bad. Like, don't think that you're doing it wrong because of that fact. All right, so first of all, let's dive right in. So the first thing I want to do is I turn off the high layer, and I'm going to work solely on the brush layer. So the brush layer is what I prefer to use is the healing tool here. Now, some people will tell you to just go ahead and blur this image and that's gonna fix things. And let me show you what that looks like so you can recognize that difference. So I'm gonna duplicate this low layer because I don't want to destroy my real version. So I'm just gonna take this layer, I'm gonna do filter, blur, and I'm gonna Gaussian blur it. Something like this, okay? And you can see now, if we do a before and after, you can see that it has kind of softened things up a bit. And now we have to mask out the parts of this, usually edges, that will get this kind of fuzzy look to it. By the way, this technique is usually called an Orton technique, and it is one where you blur an image and then replace it over the top of the existing image. It's used for flowers, for example. There's other ways to do an Orton technique. This is just one of them. But it kind of adds this softness. There used to be a show in the 80s. I can't remember. It had Bruce Willis in it. And the female actress always had an Orton effect on the lens whenever the camera was on her, which was kind of funny. But anyway, so don't do this. There's no real quick fix to do this the proper way. And it doesn't take long to do it the right way. So I'm just going to go to the low layer here, and we're working on it this way. So we're going to look at it blurry, and that's okay, because what we're doing is looking for things that draw our eye, so little marks and things like this. So I'm going to grab this brush, and I like the one that is the old one, the healing brush tool, not the new one. This one has a use, but I actually want to tell it where to get the sample. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key, click, and then I'm going to go ahead and sample over those spots. And the reason I like this technique is because there are little variations in the skin, and those little variations are being copied from one area to another area. So it doesn't look like a flat color. It actually looks like skin. And if we go and kind of undo or turn all these on, I'm clicking the Alt key and clicking this eyeball, by the way, to toggle that entire layer set. If I do that again here, you can see the before and after. This still looks legit, right? It still looks like her skin, but you see that we've removed those marks. It's that easy. So there's really no excuse. Now, I could be doing this on the brush layer, but I tell you there's a bug there. So I'm going to explain what else we can do with that in a minute, but I'm going to work on the low layer. I prefer, if I could, to work on the brush layer, and I'll talk about that bug if it happens. If it doesn't, just, feel free to do whichever you'd like. If it acts weird, then you'll know that's the problem. So I'm just going to go through quickly, and this does not take a lot of time. And I don't know why people are trying to shortcut this process, because it isn't that hard to do to begin with. This is a very quick technique, and it's nothing that a beginner couldn't do. I'm just using the Alt key and sampling constantly so that I don't create situations where I don't where I have a repeating pattern in the skin. I want to avoid that. And I'm doing this pretty aggressively. You can see that I just got rid of that marker on the side of her face, and you'd be like, why did you do that? There's nothing wrong with that. You decide what you want to do with your art and how far you want to take the retouching. This is going to be pretty minor skin wise. We're going to do a lot more makeup wise in this one. So this is going to take us literally seconds to do, and we're almost done actually. And just trying to argue with this because I want it to look like it should look. Like you want to say, does this look like it's believable? Like I shouldn't see some sort of a weird mark in the middle of somewhere. It should look like it's all believable. So it's dot here. And after a while, you kind of have to back up a bit and look at this from a distance and say, are you missing anything? Another trick that I like to do is I go up to View and choose Flip Horizontal. And now you'll see things that maybe you didn't see a second beforehand. So this is a great technique. It takes no time. We'll be in and out of the skin part of this in 5 minutes. I mean, if we really hurry. And I'm putting the spurs to it a little bit. Obviously, I'm trying to do this so that it isn't the longest video in the world, and people leave and go, well, no, I think I got it. And you missed the big part of the video, which is coming in a while. So I'll do the chest in a minute. But so let's take a look at the before and after on the face. So I'm just going to toggle this here. And that took us literally, 2 minutes-ish? I mean, it's quick. So that's really all you need to do is just the color side. So let's talk about what this other layer does. This is the texture now. Now we can go through and look for things that might be textural. So for example, you see this mark here, this one here. Ooh. New tool for looking at the screen and failing at it epically. I'm going to use the clone stamp, and I'm going to set it to current layer. If you set it to another layer, like current and below, you're going to find that it does something weird. So current layer, and what you're looking to do, I'll show you with this layer on, but I find this hard to work this way. You're looking to borrow the technique from one area and just place it over another. It's that simple, and it doesn't have to be, again, rocket science. This is a very simple thing, and you're not going to notice what changed. And that's the thing that's so insidiously good about this technique. As long as you don't borrow skin from an area that has a pattern and you repeat that pattern, you should be able to get away with murder. Now, the other thing about this is that we are zoomed in quite close. And I will tell you that that will cause you some anxiety, and you're going to see all these little marks, and you're going to get caught in this. You need to back up a little bit and decide how close you really need to be to this to make it appropriate. If this is going to be a large framed portrait, then yes, get in there and take the time to get close. But if it's not going to be, then don't do that. You know, if this is just a 5x7 or 8x10, or you're putting it on Instagram or some other place where no one's going to see it. So I did the little dig at Instagram there. Then don't worry about it, because the resolution of those sites is low, right? Facebook, I think, is like 608 pixels or something goofy, and it compresses it anyway. But if you're going to put it on, you know, an art site or something like that. Now, Rachel here, she's a friend of mine, and I want her to have nice art, so I'm going to go ahead and take a second to do this. And you see, it's just copying skin from one place and putting it on another. Now, a couple of things to worry about with this technique is if you're borrowing from a darker area to a lighter area, let me do this larger, you're going to notice that there's a blurriness to it. And if you do the opposite from a lighter area to a darker area, you're going to notice that it's very textured. So you need to do this balancing act between where you sample from. So sample from an area that's close. By the way, I'm using a clone stamp with a hard edge. We don't want to use a soft edge, and we don't want to lower the opacity. We want to do this full strength. Any other result is going to look subpar. So just trust me, always use it this way and it will work out great. Any other way you do it, and it's just going to look weird. And again, you're not cutting a corner, you're just getting an inferior result. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now that's it. That's her skin. And you can't tell me that doesn't look natural. Or before and after here. And I mean, we're done. That was it. So let's talk about fixing the problems with the makeup now, where I have gaps in color, like here, for example. So I'm gonna go back to the low layer, and now comes the part where you get to play a little artist. So I'm going to use just kind of a lowish flow, and I'm gonna sample with a paintbrush, and I'm gonna go in and just paint in. Actually, I'm gonna do it on this brush layer. I'm gonna do it on this layer, and I'm just gonna paint in flows a little aggressive here. I'm going to paint in the color that I need. It's that easy. So I'm just going to paint in right in here so that it looks good from this distance. Something like this. And that should be it. So now if we look, this should look good from the color perspective. So for the texture perspective, it's still a little wonky. And that's okay. Again, taking the clone stamp and borrowing. I like to borrow parallel. So I'm going to stamp up here and then clone down here. So you're borrowing kind of parallel to a line. If you mess it up, for example, you're going to see like this. If you have trouble aiming, by the way, you can go in, and if you're in the clone stamp tool, you can go to this palette here and click overlay. And now you get this little thing, but it's showing you the gray version of this. So it's, you know, a little harder to see. If you go to this view, then you can probably see what you're doing a little easier. But you're looking to just remove any of those glaring errors without making a clone trail, meaning you see the same mark over and over and over. Like this one could be perceived as a clone tail, even if it isn't. Let's just go ahead and knock some of those issues out so no one can say, I see the clone tracking there. And now this should look good. Now, if you wanted to put more makeup on her, for example, say you're a digital makeup person, any layers you put between the high and the low layer here can be used to modify the image. So if I put another layer in here, hit B for brush, and let's grab like this blue here. And I recommend, by the way, you have a makeup artist. Don't do this and think it's the equal, okay? And you definitely want to have a makeup artist. So what you can do here is you can just apply whatever makeup you want to, and the texture of the skin is up here, right? So we're applying it between the skin color and the texture color. So we can get away with murder here, especially if you change your brush to a different mode so you don't paint over this black. But if we wanted to do like this blue here, and we wanted more blue, I wanted to bring it around, you could certainly do so. And it will look legitimate. So just a great little technique that any layers you put between the high layer and the low layer will look like they belong there. I would recommend, though, that if you do this and you're going to do makeup, that you change the layer mode to something like color or hue or something like that, so it makes things a little bit easier. Okay, so let's continue onward. So we got that part done. Let's fix this area on the chin here and by the lip. So again, I'm gonna go to this view here because I think it might be easier to kind of see what we're fixing. And I work directly on this layer, and I'm just trying to fix the texture so that it doesn't jump out at me, right? I want to see this all look like its neighbors. It shouldn't be obvious that there's a texture problem here. Something simple. So these little holes here. And then I'm going to go back. I'm just clicking Alt on the eyeball there. And I'm going to go to this, I can paint on the little layer or the brush layer here. The B for brush. And I'm looking to do is borrow color that's similar. So if I just Alt click here, and then I can go ahead and paint in there. And that's a little dark, or a little bright, I should say. So I'm going to borrow like maybe over here. I'm just going to paint that in. Here too. And again, borrow from areas that are close to where you're trying to paint in so that it doesn't look weird. And just go and paint it in. Now, if we have a color difference, there's another way to do this. Let's talk about that. So I need to apply this, though, onto that layer, the low layer, but I want to do so in a way that's not destructive. So there's a couple techniques to do this. My favorite, though, is obviously just painting directly on the layer, like we've talked about already. This is safe and allows you to kind of do, ultimate control. But if you're not a person who's comfortable doing this, and I don't know why you wouldn't be, but let's just say you're not, you can go ahead and kind of paint over with a different hue. And I don't find that to be, this, by the way, is all the work we've done. It doesn't look like a lot. To do that, you just create a new layer and set it to like hue. Now, in hue, we can do anything, again, similar to what we were doing when we were painting the eye earlier. If we grab this red color, for example, and you paint in here, hue. That should be showing. Let's try color. Here we go. We want to get rid of this tan by painting in white. We can just go and grab this white color, or whatever this color is in here, and then paint it in here. But it's going to, again, desaturate all of its neighbors and take away a lot of that character that we're trying to grow. It's okay in areas like this, where you need, say, a bigger expanse of this blue, and we're going to talk about making that look legit here too. With white, it's really kind of hard. So let's keep this around. We'll call this color, because we know we're going to need it in a bit. And we're just going to go back to this and paint in the areas that need it. Or, as I say, you can just continue. I'm going to turn this overlay thing off, though. Just continue in this mode, working. Again, what we're doing is we're working in here, trying to make this look how we want it to look. And it looks pretty good on the color layer. The great thing about frequency separation is that the issue is on one of the two layers, right? It's either on the high layer or the low layer. And until we started complicating our lives with all these layers in between, we know that it's on one of those two layers. And that allows us a lot of wiggle room for fixing whatever we need to fix. Oops. I turned that overlay layer off, and now I need it. So show overlay. And what you're trying to do is just use that to see the edge so you can make the rest of that mark look good. And you don't want any, again, clone tracking or anything weird in here. So you're just trying to make it look as good as you can. There you go. Okay, so by this lip over here, same exact technique. I need to extend that red, so I'm just going to grab the edge of it and pull it over. And that should look pretty good. And if we have any issues with the color, then I'll just, again, go to this color layer here, and I can go and grab the red and say, this is all supposed to be red in here. And this area is supposed to be white-ish. Same with the lips here, B. I'm just grabbing this purple color and gonna paint in here. And again, you can use it all the way around the edge if you don't, if you need to make that big of a correction. But be careful because the color is going to change, right? So like for here, it's a little redder, for example, and up here it's a little more purple. Now you normally don't have to make this level of correction, but I want to show you the technique so that you at least know how to do it. There we go. high layer, again, just getting rid of any little marks we see that turn that really off. Look like issues here. There's another one. Let's just take care of this stripe being a little wider here. Like that. And if it's right here, then we know the remaining issue is going to be on this color layer, or on the low layer, or on the brush layer. It's on one of those three now. That's why I said we've complicated our life by adding additional layers in here. But this looks okay. So I'll probably actually go in and brush in a color here, not that aggressively. I like a low flow on the brush. So we make this edge as tight as we want it to be. Try and keep it though so it looks legitimate. Like we want to make this a little bit darker. Let me grab this up here so we have some variation. And then we can go and turn that off and on. This is what we did. And that should look before and after. So all we did was tighten up that line by putting it in here. So this technique is, I mean, powerful. Yes, it's time consuming, but you get a wonderful result from it. So let's do the same thing here. I'm just going to brush, and I'm going to grab a kind of whatever color this is and brush in this black a bit. Makes this lines a little bit darker. Maybe use this one. Like this. And then color-wise, we know we need to replace that brown in there, so we're just going to grab that blue and go over here. And that doesn't look that good, so let's undo that. And the reason I want to do that is because if you're trying to fix something, it's all troubleshooting, right? If you fix it on this layer and it's still not right, then you have to fix it on this layer. But now these two are above it, and it creates this complication. So I like to work from the bottom up. So if I just alt-click on that eyeball again, that is such a handy command. I can use J from here, again, to correct the skin, and I'm just going to fix it as best I can here and do any minor corrections using the other techniques. So I'm just going to fix it this way. This is often the reason why I like to work on one layer when I'm doing painting on the skin. It's like here, I can go and now paint on the brush layer. I grab this brush and kind of fix this white in here. And you want a soft brush for this, by the way. And the blue here as well. Then we should have what looks like a pretty good fit. Now we just need to fix the texture. Again, just borrow from areas that are close to it. So if we look at what we're doing here. By the way, if you have trouble seeing this, you can always put one of my favorite methods would be the, where is it? Brightness and contrast, which is something you never use, and turn it to legacy and just yank up the contrast. As long as those layers above this layer, you're not really affecting anything. It's just helping you to see. So if you need to go in and see what you're doing, then this is a really great way to do it, and it doesn't mess anything up. So we can kind of make sure that we like all these marks in here look good to us. If there's anything else we want to see, like to look for any weird. Since I'm doing this, might as well take a second. I don't want to make it smooth. That's another one of those things. Skin is not smooth, so trying to make skin look smooth is bad. Plus, look for textures that are different. Like this texture here really doesn't fit, but I can borrow textures from around it to try and add to it. This area here doesn't have a lot of texture, so I may want to add some texture to it. So you want this balance of having even texture everywhere, not just eliminating texture. You want to make the texture even. So again, I'm in here pretty close, and I'm going to get into that morass of not being able to pop out of there because I'm going to be looking at it forever. But when you're done, make sure you turn that off so you can see what you're doing. And now this line should look perfect. So we fixed that mostly just on this low layer. Kurt asks if this is, you assume it can be done if someone did a blotchy job in the makeup. Yes, absolutely. In this case, the makeup artist did a wonderful job. I'm just trying to make this kind of more poster level of, finished because I want it for other things. And I thought it'd be a good technique to show. So we have a great before and after now, and it didn't take us that long. Obviously, I'm talking and goofing around the whole time. So let's go down and fix the body paint using those techniques again. And I think by then you'll get the idea. And I'm going to I'm probably going to combine these two layers here because I don't need them to be separate for what I do. And that should not affect anything we did up here, by the way. It's like still all good. Although I see some little things I missed. So let's just fix that one here. So what layer is it on? Let's go ahead and look at the high layer first, the texture layer. And I'm going to use that little helper layer. So I'm going to go S, and I'm going to fix any area here. Like I'm going to borrow from the area of the lip next to it. And then here maybe as well, just to kind of make that transition look a little better. And then I can turn that off. And then anything that's left obviously is going to be on this layer. So you just use your J key again to heal. And you, oh yeah, there we go. So do you see this? See that trash? This is the bug that I keep talking about, where if you're working on a layer between two layers, the healing brush won't recognize the anti-aliasing around the edge. And it's been there for, I don't even know how many versions of Photoshop, and it drives me batty. So I'm just going to merge this down, and we're just going to work on the low layer because then it'll work. But it drives me nuts. And everyone's always asking me, like, why don't you just dodge and burn on a gray layer or on a curve layer, excuse me, and not use a gray layer? That'd be the reason right there, because that bug pops up when you try and use a gray layer or a non-gray layer to do dodging and burning. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so down in here, we have kind of the same thing. I'm going to use another layer here because I'm going to paint, and painting seems to work okay. I want to paint in this blue color, and I want to paint it where this yellow should be because I got a little aggressive with my yellow. So I'm just going to go and do this. Now, this is one way to do it, right? And this seems to work, flawlessly. There's another way to do it. In that way, it's quicker. So if you're looking for a faster way to do it, this would be it. So what I typically do is create a new layer. And again, I talked about this before, and set it to color. And we can do that by using a brush tool and going here and saying color, and it should replace this. We can also use hue here too. And it should replace the hue without damaging the brightness or darkness like the brush would, right? So we're just using the hue to fix that. And we can do this a bit more aggressively, actually. So just go in here and blue. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's better than it was, right? I mean, that's kind of the goal here. So something like this. And if we go and we turn this layer on and off, you can see we did. But if we view the whole, if you're looking at the whole picture here, you can see that we've made a pretty good change already. That was what we needed to do. And I can go and say, I want this yellow to be a little bit more in here. And you can go ahead and be an artist too. I mean, just, use your color palette that you've got there and fix up whatever color you need to fix up. So blue here. I use my sampling a lot. It's just the Alt key to sample like that. We still have a bit of a stripe in here, and that's one of the problems with using hue versus using color. Color is a more aggressive, but it also affects other things like saturation as well. And you can see that up here. That's what this issue is. We've kind of oversaturated that area. So color in this case might be a better option. So I'm getting a better replacement. And if you have a line like this too, again, you can paint with black. There's no rule, but black is going to show is actually no saturation or no color. So not as easy to do. And we can't do it on this layer because it's not really going to replace that. So you may have to put a layer above this one. And we'll just call this one our blacks. So, or line work. You separate it as much as you need to separate it to make things work for you. And this is too aggressive. Let's boil this down a bit. So we're just going to paint this line in like that. So we fixed our line work. So here's our before and after. And that's really the technique. And then I don't like this line here, for example. So I would go and use my brush on this layer and just paint right over this. If I don't mind it being there a bit, although if it really bothers me at the end, I may go back and heal it out. But when we do that, we'll just flatten all of our work and kind of kind of make that the next pass. Try and do everything on one layer. We have a bit of blue in here. So that's the technique. I'm going to go ahead and finish this out, and I won't do it as part of the stream because I think by now you got it. I'll do it for a few more minutes, but I want to keep this a little bit shorter. I find people tend to abandon the stream about 30 minutes in or so, and if that's going to be the case, then we're just not going to make the videos that long. If you feel strongly about that, then let me know how you want me to do these. I'm trying to obviously help you be better photographers and better post-production people, and these videos are for you. They're not for me. So you let me know what you think, what you want to see. If these are helpful, what techniques do you have trouble with? What areas of Photoshop bother you? Now, I do have a Couch to Photoshop tutorial series here on YouTube that is for photographers because there's a lot of situations I run into where people don't know how to do the basics. You don't need to know every part of Photoshop. You just need to know the parts that apply to photography. And I think you stare at Photoshop as this giant monster, which it is. You don't need to know the giant monster. You just need to know the pieces that matter to you as a photographer. So you let me know what you think of that, and I'll make those videos. That simple. I'm just going to go ahead and aggressively paint a bit of this in here. So that's the secret to retouching all this. Same thing here. I'll do one more and then we'll call it good. And I'll actually do this a little bit differently. I'm going to go ahead and assume that, let's say I was done with all this frequency separation jazz. I would just Control-Alt-Shift-E to flatten it all and put this on the top. That's like how I know how I'm done. Then this frequency separation stuff doesn't matter anymore. And now you can probably use the healing tool and get rid of this. So again, I'm going to sample and then paint parallel. Just paint right over it. So you can use just the healing brush to do a lot of this without even frequency separating. And it works. But it gets harder when you get in, say, close to this line here as to what's going to start to look believable, because it's going to start to pull the color. So you got to know a couple different techniques to be able to handle all this stuff and to be able to troubleshoot. Photoshop is troubleshooting your photography. It's not, yes, you can be an artist in here, but it doesn't have to always be a destructive train wreck. You can use it for the power of good. And right now, as I say, all the things that I'm doing are making my frequency separation layers less valuable. So these really aren't useful to me anymore. So I'm just going to delete them. Because if I need to separate this again, I can. It doesn't cost me anything. Remember, frequency separation is lossless. So we can do it as many times as we like, if done properly, I should say. And you can see I have a lot of work in here to do. But I won't do that on stream here because I'm sure that will put many of you to sleep. But this is, again, just another tool that might be faster than trying to argue with a lot of that. So, yeah, I appreciate the comments. And again, let me know if there's an area in Photoshop that you specifically get stuck at. And if you've used frequency separation before, what about it frustrated you, or what areas did you find to be really helpful? To say, I think it's a pretty flawless technique and it works very well. And there's more than one way to do it, by the way. I haven't gone into that, but there's more than one way to actually do the separation action itself. But so here's our before and after. Just a little bit here, and obviously the face is pretty substantial. So that was our before and after there. And I don't like this red on the lip, but now it's too late. So I gotta go back and undo all that. Shouldn't have separated that so early. So I'll have to go back and undo those brush strokes and fix it up. But you get the idea. Everybody take care, stay safe, and I will catch you next time.